Hi, welcome to a Curve tutorial video. My name is Natan Cohen. I'm the head of customer success here at Curve. And in this video, we're going to learn how to set common default settings for the dashboard widget designer. So in this tutorial, you'll learn how to set default fonts, font sizes for things like the text object. And we'll also look at how you can set default fonts as well as default properties for some of the filter controls, specifically the list filter control. So let's get into it. So let's pop over to the customization documentation first, and let's scroll down and find the section on defaults. So this is the subproperty that we're going to use to set the default properties for various components in the dashboard design mode. So it looks like this, right? Defaults, and then a subproperty called custom styles, and then another subproperty for the component that you're trying to change. You'll find valid values to use here for fonts directly below that. If you want to set Arial as a default font, you do need to use this entire string, okay? Not just set it to Arial. So this means use Arial, and if the system doesn't have it installed, use Helvetica. And if that's not installed, then use any sans serif font. That's the way it works. And the way to read this is to go down and find the UI component that you're looking for. So this would be for text items. And then we'll use the JSON dot notation to denote the hierarchy. So this is not the property you define. This means that within the defaults property, there's a subproperty called custom styles. Within that, there's a subproperty object called text. So this is an object, this is an object, this is the property, right? And this will take a string value, either left, center, right, or justified. So that's the way you read this. And so you'll find that for text objects, images, buttons, all of the list controls, tabs, all of it's here. So like I mentioned, we're going to set default font sizes for all text objects, and we are also going to set the defaults for list filters as well, just so you can see some examples. And these are some common default settings that are popular to set, and it saves your users time because they won't have to set these defaults themselves. So let's start with the text object. We're going to set a default font family for Arial. We're going to set the default alignment to left, and we're going to set a default font size of 12 pixels. So let's pop over to Visual Studio Code and see how we do this. So here we are in Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to define my customization object. And the first thing I'm going to do is define how I want to scope it. It should be for views. It should be specifically for design. And I'm setting defaults. All of this you can get from the documentation. And then within defaults, I am setting custom styles. And within custom styles, I'm doing this for text objects, okay? That's the property hierarchy for the text object within the dashboard builder design mode. And as I mentioned before, first we want to set the font family. And the value that we need to use for Arial is Arial, Helvetica, sans serif as a default. And we want to set the default font size. Again, the documentation says that should be a numeric and then pixel number, say 12 pixels. And I want the default justification to be left, and the property for that from the documentation is align text set to left. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to disable the dashboard ID property so that we go straight to the builder mode, and we're going to give this a test. Okay, here in the browser, we're going to give this a test. I'm going to refresh my widget, we're going to go into the builder. And what I've done is I've set defaults for the text object. So we're going to add a text object here. And now if I go to the text config, my font type should be defaulting to Arial, and it is. The font size to 12 pixels. And the align left button should be clicked by default. So it looks like that worked. This is my default font. Okay. So now I've saved the user some time. Now they can just add the text object and just start writing a text label. For the second example, what we're going to do is configure the multi-select to also behave a certain way. So by default, most designers will want this to work as a list, a multi-select list. So we're going to set that as the default. We're going to set the default font type also to Arial. And we're going to change the automatic trigger to a button trigger so that when you select a value, it doesn't automatically refresh the dashboard, but it rather waits for all values to be selected. So we're going to change the trigger default to button, and then we're going to customize the text or the label on the button to say submit rather than filter. So let's go back to the documentation and see how we do that. So flipping back to the documentation, we want to scroll down to filter control multi-select. That would be this area here, and it starts right here for multi-select list items. We're going to set the font family using this property, and we're going to set a property for the trigger type and the default mode, changing it from automatic to button, as well as setting the default button label. So let's go over to Visual Studio Code and create that. So here we are in Visual Studio Code, and we want to define a new section under the default custom style for filter control multi-select list. And we're going to set the default type to list. We're going to set the default trigger to button. Now we're going to set the trigger button label to submit rather than the default, which would be filter. All right, so we're going to go back to our browser and we're going to test it. And here we are back in the browser. I'm going to refresh and we're going to go back into design mode, back into our dashboard here, and we're going to give it a test. So now when I add a multi-select list, all right, by default, we should have a list type, and we do. The trigger should be button instead of automatic, and the button text is now submit. So I'm just going to do one more change and make the font type Arial, and we'll be right back. All right, so it's the same property, font family, with the exact same setting here. So I'm just going to make this appear first and save it, and then we'll go back and give it a test. So I'm going to refresh my browser, go back into Studio, and go down to my multi-select list, add another here. All my defaults are still valid, and now my font type is set to Arial by default. So that was a tutorial video on how you can use the customization object for the dashboard widget to set the default property settings for various UI components in design mode. That saves your users time when they're using these components so that they don't have to set those properties themselves. And we saw how to change the default fonts for a text object, as well as how to set the default font, as well as the default mode and trigger type for a multi-select list filter. So We hope you found this useful, and thank you for watching.